So great to have everyone once again. Friday, first question we always ask is how are you? Green, yellow, red. Green, great. Yellow, so-so. Red, not so good. I'm really green today, even though I'm on the way out for a week. And I'm really green because I actually, on my flight, got to sit by myself, listened to a podcast, and made about 2 pages of notes in my Remarkable. And I was like,
Wow.
oh my God, this is heaven, like a heaven morning after being on Zoom calls all week.
Mm.
Yesterday, just guess what? Yesterday at 4 p.m., I looked at my Whoop stats. You know how
Yeah.
many steps I took?
At 4 p.m. Okay, where were you yesterday? I don't know where
I
you
was
were.
in at my house.
You were at your house? Oh gosh, I hope it was more than 1,000.
It was 96.
Oh,
I told one of my colleagues, I'm like, okay, once I get done with this call, I'm going to get to 100 steps.
did you?
Uh, oh yeah, I did. Yeah, I went to the bathroom. It was just 96 was
I
just back and forth to the bathroom a few times.
So last year, I think I missed Unleash I got so sick, so sick. It was the first time in my life I never broke 100 steps. I was in bed so long. So that's not good. More steps. Walk around, take walking meetings.
Grace is red, but for Taylor Swift fans, that's good. Thank you for making. Steve Jewell is red from sunburn.
Oh,
And has it been sunny in Minneapolis today? I think that's from t in Minneapolis.
yes, you can get.
Megan's green. Ekta yellow, reddish, oranges. Ekta,
Ooh,
we have to cheer you up a little. JC, yellow red, but
yeah.
started therapy yesterday and is living in a box farm at the moment, but that will all get better soon. JC, if you need to talk, you know where I am. Oh, it looks like Steve was on a cruise. Um, oh, this Canada US hockey game was quite the thing. Did you see that whole thing, Jess? You got a lot of you got a lot of stuff going on in your
Yeah.
life. So you probably didn't see the hockey game last night, but
Not
I
see the
knew I
hockey.
had to get up massive early, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm gonna stay up and watch this game. And then all of a sudden it goes into overtime. I'm like,
Did you see it
okay.
through
It,
overtime?
it was a good game. It was a really good game. Yes. Canada won.
I,
Congratulations over the US, but it was great. It was a fun game to watch for those of you that didn't watch
oh,
it. And for those of you outside the US, either don't know what hockey is or don't care about what we're talking about, we'll move on. So for those of you that are red or yellow, I hope that today's show will move you on that dial. The next thing we always do is one big thing, and one big thing, otherwise known as OBT. It's pretty good marketing, right? One big thing, and that's us and y'all recognizing one big thing for you this week, and just taking time to take a minute, close your eyes, reflect. What's one big thing that you accomplished this week, that you felt great about this week, you did this week that helped humanity or helped you as we move into the weekend? Jess, I'll turn it over to you as everyone else types in the chat, please.
yes, please share. My favorite part of the week isn't just seeing all of your names, saying hello, but it's also reading all of your one big things. I didn't watch the hockey game last night because I took my oldest daughter to the gym, and that's my one big thing. She has discovered working out. And like I'm mom, so I don't know anything. I can't tell her anything. I can't make a suggestion that might be a good suggestion. She has to discover these things. If anybody has teenagers, she has to discover these things for herself. And it wasn't the first time she's been to the gym. This is pretty consistent now, her coming with me for the last month or so. And every single time, without fail, we walk out of the gym together and she says, oh my gosh, I can't believe how good that feels. And it's totally a mental health thing for her as it is for me. I work out to find peace and to reconnect mind, body, breath, all of that stuff. It's totally to stay sane, to like all of the things. And the fact that she's discovering that for herself is super, super powerful. I wasn't in my I was in my 30s before I had any idea that physical health and mental health were connected. Um, I took my own path. I became a racing junkie and all of that. But the fact that she's having this little enlightening moment, I love that for her. So that's what we were doing last night. I came home and I FaceTimed my youngest and I said, "What are you doing?" She was watching the hockey game. And I said, "What hockey game?" That's how little I knew. So that's my one big thing. It's small,
No,
but it's
no,
very.
it's not small. It's awesome. And I just before I do mine, I love some. I always love reading these, and I always sometimes I go back and listen to the podcast to see how goofy we sound reading stuff to people that can't see what's in the chat, but people say they like hearing about them. So, um, someone said successful process reengineering to reimagine old stuff and creating better stuff. I love how people mix work and personal in these. I got to have loads of cuddles with my 3-week-old grandson, which I love. We rented a classic Beetle,
Oh,
dressed up as my grandparents, and surprised them. Recreated a family photo from the 70s. Like, Jess, that sounds like something you would do all day long, doesn't it?
totally.
Uh, Zach got verbal agreement from a former National Football League player, Viking, to help with Pillars of Valor, which we've talked about on here before, which is great.
Yeah.
John went to a film festival. Michelle was asked to be a mentor to a new leader. I saw Sarah finish her second week on her new job. Um, there was one other. Oh, Christy picked up a laptop this morning and watched the preview video for AI Essentials, which is a course, it's a Mercer course. So excited about that. Finished my article on AI for HR 101. Wow, there's so much cool stuff on here.
I love
So
it.
just my one big thing kind of relates a little bit to your story, but it's does anyone ever tell you, and I'm sure you've heard it because we've talked about it, I think, but like your kids grow up fast and love every minute of it.
Yes.
And even though you're in the middle of like different things with them all the time, you all of a sudden you're kind of like, yeah. So some people know, not everyone, that my son Ben, my 20-year-old, started. For those of you that watch this show ever, started a semester in at the University of Oregon. Came back to Minneapolis and did a semester at University of St. Thomas, and has decided that formal quote unquote education is not his gig,
Mhm.
and he leaves on Wednesday for a at least 3-month school study abroad program in Singapore and Malaysia. And last night he left, said goodbye to me because I'm not going to be there Wednesday, and I just broke down and cried as hard as I did when I dropped him off at Oregon.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my God, I can't, like, I'm doing it again. Like,
Mhm.
it was like, wow, maybe it would have been better if he would, you know, I'm just kidding. It wouldn't have been better if he would have stayed at school. But like the fact that he's like, I'm so proud, like, I'm gonna
Mhm.
start crying right now, that, 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 that people explore. People have the opportunity to explore and the freedom to explore. And I think sometimes we take for granted our freedoms.
Mm.
We talk about politics and we don't like politics and things like that, but just a 20-year-old could use a tool like Twitter, DM a CEO, say, I'm sick of school. Do you have anything that I could do to help you? He says, sure, you up for coming over to this thing in Singapore and Malaysia? And the next thing you know, he's there. It's just the opportunities that we all have are so amazing. So and at the same time, back to what I said, enjoy every minute of it because all of a sudden you're like, wow, he's gone. And did I say the things I should have said? Um, did I raise him right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that's my one big thing. It's a little bit
Oh,
sappy, but
I didn't think
it,
you, I forgot you had to say goodbye early. I knew it was coming, but that's huge. Oh,
yeah, no, I mean, the amazing thing with technology, with like WhatsApp and all the other stuff, we're all good, but yeah, it's just a grown up thing, I guess. So I don't have anything else to say about it. It's just I just hug your kids, hug your
uh-huh.
kids, and do everything you can to give them a foundation that they can make decisions on their own, and they're not forced into anything. They're not sheep following a path. but they feel like they can spread their wings. That's how we've always tried to raise our kids, and I'm so glad that he is.
It's funny that Sarah said my parents would have been like, no. I asked my parents to study abroad when I was in high school. I wanted to go to Germany, and they said no. And it broke my heart. I was so ready to go. I was so ready to fly the nest so early in my life. And the first thing I did when I got to college was go. And I went twice. I did 2 studies, 2 semesters abroad. But it was different then. They couldn't keep track of me. I backpacked Europe for 5 months and nobody knew where I was. And I was happy with that. I'm sure it was awful for them. So the fact that it's so different, that you can stay in touch, you can follow his journey as much as you or he want. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, yeah, it's an amazing thing. Just so you know, well, I'm not going to even say it, but it's all good. It's all good. So best of luck, Ben, to you, and
Yes.
so excited on your journey, and it'll change your life forever. So on that note, we are going to do. Guess what we're going to do, Jess? We're going to do a walk-in song for our next guest. A
I love
walk-in
it.
song for our next guest. Ready?
Mhm.
Hours of phrases I've memorized, thousands of lines on the page, all of my notes in a desolate pile I haven't touched in an age. And I can burn the evidence, but I can't burn the pain, and I can't forget it. How does it feel to be an expert in a dying field? And how do you know it's over when you can't let go?
Did they just say expert in a dying field? Is that what they just said, Jess? Expert
Mhm.
in a dying field?
Yeah, and Thomas, I think that might have been uh emblematic of our conversation, maybe.
Only a doctor could
Only
be
a
so smart to
doctor.
choose such a song. Welcome, doctor. Welcome, doctor.
Thank you, people. Thank you. It's so lovely to see me. Can you hear me okay? Am I doing,
Yeah.
have I passed the I can use Zoom test?
Yes, Thomas, did you
Brilliant.
just say it's so lovely to see me? Like you were talking to
You,
yourself?
you, both of you,
Oh,
both
I
of you,
thought you
both
said
of
it
you.
was lovely to see you.
It's
You
lovely
look
to
blue.
see both of you, both of
You
you.
look very blue.
I'm
You look
trying, I'm trying, you know.
for some reason you look about 10 years younger.
That's the power of Zoom, the power of Zoom.
I think you were on this show early on, Thomas. Either it was a one-on-one call or you were on this show and you came on in your bicycling outfit. I think you were fresh off the bike.
Okay. Oh gosh. Okay. That was bold of me.
I loved it. It's like me coming in from the gym. And I love that you're a bicycle enthusiast and you
Yes.
have incredible musical taste. I read your Substack for a lot of reasons. One of them is to get to the bottom of the article and see what song you recommended.
Well, that one was from actually what came from one of my kids. It's by a band from New Zealand called the Beths. You know,
Mm.
and the song is called "An Expert in the Dying Field." So it's always reminds me that need to keep teaching ourselves stuff. Otherwise, we are experts in dying fields. So it's
Yeah.
Well, Thomas, I don't know if you saw, I wrote a column this past weekend on relevance,
uh,
which went in on Substack, which kind of goes along with that thought of how do we stay relevant? And maybe just for a second, I mean, you're one of the people that I think is brilliant at staying relevant. But you're one of those guys. By the way, Harry West said to say hello to you. I was on the phone with him
oh god,
little
Harry,
bit
oh,
ago. But maybe you can talk a little about your background because similar to me, we've been doing this for a while, but yet somehow we're trying to stay relevant.
yeah. So oh, I got into HR tech by mistake about 30 something years ago. I was at university. I was studying HR, and someone came around the university and did a talk about HR technology. And he, after the talk, he asked, "Has anyone here got a computer in the class?" And two of us put a hand. He says, "Oh, I'd like to meet you afterwards." And he talked to us. He says, "Oh, I've got a job for you in something called HR Tech." And I said, "What's the starting salary?" And he said, "Twice the starting salary of an HR manager." And I said, "Cool." And I've been involved somehow in HR tech ever since. So I worked at, no, I ended up going to SAP. I grew up in South Africa. I went to SAP in South Africa. And then they moved me to Germany, supposedly for 2 years, and it ended up being several decades. I spent some time at Gartner. So I was building the Magic Quadrants and all those other things, hype cycles and all the rest. And then I went back to SAP. Lars Delgaard and Dmitry Kokovsky phoned me up and said, we need somebody who's not a German, not an American, who understands cloud and understands on-premise. And there's like a list of like 3 people in the world, and we think you are one of them. So stop talking about stuff and come and build something. So then I moved to SuccessFactors, and I initially headed up product for Employee Central, and then I eventually took over running the products at SuccessFactors. I left, set up my own advisory firm, and I started to work very closely with Jason Corsello, who'd set up Acadian Ventures, the early stage fund. I'd actually invested in the fund as an investor, and Jason and I started hanging out more and more, and doing stuff together. And then we decided we might as well join forces. So then I decided to become a full-time venture capitalist and invest in the space. One thing that's a bit weird about me is I collect a couple of things. I collect vinyl, and I collect degrees. So I keep like going back to university and learning stuff. It's kind of weird. I'm almost, or every couple of years I'll do some sort of a formal education course thing. I just think it's a good way of keeping yourself focused and learn things. So I've always kind of had that approach of studying a little bit, studying something on the side while I'm at work. And then that's sort of always kept me relevant. I like to read a lot as well. So, I think it's a shame that for so many people, they kind of go to university in their 20s, and then they it's a haze of self-development and alcohol. And then, at least mine was, and then they don't go back again. And it's quite nice to go back. It's quite nice to go back again and rediscover, learn new things, and I'm very glad that I've been doing that. Yeah.
Well, and I think, Thomas, if I could, I think that the concept of, Steve just put in the chat, vinyl I get, but multiple degrees. One of the things, you guys, that's really interesting, just Thomas, you didn't mention or maybe you did mention where you live now, but getting a degree, in Germany is different than getting a degree in the United States. Both from a cost standpoint as well as what the experience is like. And I think it's important from a global standpoint to understand that, because, the way I believe, and when I have done some teaching in Germany, like the people I'm teaching with are, I'll call them relevant, and I'll call them very applicable to today's world. And I find in the US, oftentimes that's not the case. So I think that there are people in the US that would say, why is he getting multiple degrees at this point? Even though you are learning something, I think what's really important, though, is how education's different globally. That wasn't what our topic was going to be today, but if you want to expand on it a little.
I have to drop the Oxford word. So I spent the last year at the big O. How do you know someone's gone to Oxford? Don't worry, they'll tell you. So I did something called a postgraduate diploma in the business of AI. Which was super interesting. Not particularly technical, but it was a mixture of AI tech and trying to think about how to apply AI to business. So really cool course, and met some cool people on it. That's the other thing, is you get to meet some different people, which is a lot of fun.
Did you learn anything about AI that made you think about its application in our industry differently?
Yeah, quite a lot. AI is the same as any other software. There's 2 jobs: building it and then implementing it. And I have much more respect for the people that implement it than the people that build it. Because, change management, getting employee engagement, getting executive buy-in, all those things don't go away just because it's fancy AI. So It's great to understand what how regression works, and how forest and trees, random forests, and how all these different AI techniques work. But they're just shiny objects unless someone actually makes the effort of actually deploying them. So I have massive respect for people who actually deploy the technologies. And that came up time and time again. It's you can have all this fancy technology, and you need a couple of things. You need to, it's so much sounds like something I did for a laugh, and I should send it to you guys. You'll find it fun. Is I read the minutes of the first IT project. It was a payroll project. So if anyone says like HR Tech's behind, no, HR Tech is where it all started. The first use of a business of a computer for a business process was in 1951 in the UK. It was payroll. And I read the minutes of the project minutes, because they're all typed up, and it reads exactly like any other modern project, like stakeholder buy-ins missing, vendors late,
requirements.
the specs aren't clearly defined enough. It reads just like a modern IT project. It's just written in really posh 1950s English, and it's a fascinating read. But again, I think the thing that I learned the most from the course was that the data that you put into these models is so important, and getting that data right will go a long way to determine the value of what comes out the other side. So if you have to set the expectations of your AI strategy based on the availability of the data, rather than trying to think about. And this is one of the criticisms I have of most HR tech, is that we imagine an ideal world where every single employee is going to wake up in the morning and the first thing they're going to do is open up the employee self-service and maintain some records, right? And the reality is that if someone did that every day, we'd probably incarcerate them as being a danger to society, right? So HR systems should learn from other systems, and learn from the environment, and learn and derive things, and soak things up from around, rather than always demanding that we type things in. And your AI strategy, if you're going to do something in AI, my suggestion would be, the first thing is have a good, honest look at what data you have, and cut your cloth accordingly, and do the best you can with the data that you have, and don't try and do something that you don't have the data for. Otherwise, you'll spend a lot of money, and you'll have a disappointing outcome, and you'll probably spoil your AI intent for a couple of years because of that thing. So my sense is modesty. I think a modest approach to AI is for many people is a I obviously want to, as a venture capitalist, I want to talk about all the cool, awesome stuff that's going on. But my suggestion for most people, most organizations, is to find a data set they have in your organization that is reliable, and start with that. And then what will happen is, once you've succeeded with that, then it'll be a virtuous circle, where then people will want to use more. And so then you can say, well, if we had this data, then we could do more. And then you'll encourage the data culture on the back of on the back of that. And maybe the other let me stop.
Thomas.
No, you guys go ahead.
No, what I was going to say, Thomas, is you talk to vendors a lot today, and of course, every vendor is building AI into what they're doing.
Yeah.
Building AI, infusing AI. You pick your marketing word that you want into it. And, being an advisor with customers every day, one of the things that we hear often is, well, what tools should I use? What tools should I use? What's this Workday thing? What's this Success Factors thing? What's this ChatGPT? Oh my God, Grok. Maybe we should use Grok. And I think there's more people, I believe, and I'd love your thoughts on this. There's more people right now worried about which tool to use than actually understanding what you just said about data.
Yeah.
Because most of them, I mean, this is a bold statement, and I know some people are not going to like it, but even though we've got these amazing transactional systems that people like you and I and others built 20 years ago, um, most people don't have good data in them. So
Mm.
placing an AI layer on top of them, quote unquote, isn't going to get us what we're trying to get to or what we want.
Yeah.
So I guess my question to you is, how do you guide vendors? How are you guiding vendors now? A, but then B, if you're thinking about consumers, like, do you agree with my thought that they're spending too much time on which tool and not enough on what the
Yeah.
outcome
I mean,
is?
I do a fair bit of endurance sport, but I'm a bit of a sort of all the gear, no idea kind of guy. So I'm in the N+1 phase on bicycles at the moment. Those of you who cycle will know what I mean. So I'm buying a new bike at the moment, and um, um, you can debate like, do I buy a Cervelo or do I buy a Canyon or do I buy a Pinarello or do I buy whatever? But at the end of the day, it's all about your legs, and your lungs, and the same, maybe perhaps a less obscure metaphor, is running shoes, right? It doesn't really matter whether you buy Adidas, Nike, or Puma, or Brooks, or Altria, or whatever it is, or you run barefoot. You've got to run, and so I don't think spending a lot of time like pondering over tool A versus tool B is necessarily a good thing to do. Provided that tool A or tool B is vaguely adequate for the purposes that you want to use it for, get on and do it. Because what's happening at the moment is the tooling is changing so fast, and trying to keep up with changing and tooling is a mug's game. There's no way you'll keep up, because it's not your job to keep up, right? People like me, whose job it is to keep up, can't keep up. So, you've got an HR department to run, you've got all kinds of other things to do. Yeah, you're not spending 3 hours a day reading shit on LinkedIn about this technology or that technology, or browsing academic papers or whatever, trying to keep up with this stuff. And I can't keep up with it, right? And so it's like, at some point you've got to just say, this is good enough for the purpose that I have. Let's get on and use it, and I think that's where I'd suggest, and you focus on. And what I'd also say, more importantly, is choose your business problem, right? Like, what's the business problem you want to have, and look how you're going to address that. And maybe the way you address it involves AI, maybe it doesn't. And if it does involve AI, then maybe it involves generative AI. But actually, there's a good chance that you can actually solve the problem with other forms of AI. And actually, most of the time, you don't need, for many problems that people are using GenAI for, it's the wrong technology. It's very
Yeah.
good at managing text. It's very good at textual-based stuff, but it's really shit at maths. And even though sometimes it gets the maths right, and it's better than you and I are doing maths, better than me at doing maths anyway. Jason might be a maths whiz, but I think be careful about which tool, rather than worrying about which Gen AI do I use, worry about, should I be using Gen AI for this problem at all?
Yeah, I love that.
Is a much more
I love
sensible way of looking at it.
I love the way you just said that. Just so in case you didn't see it in the chat, Brian Summer just said, "Please tell Herr Otter that I said hello." So Brian Summers here.
Well, geez, that's high praise from Brian. Normally he doesn't say that. Normally he just scowls at me. Hello, Brian. You
I think
handsome
that was
beast.
I think that was when you were a vendor. He's
Yeah.
probably not that way anymore.
No.
Like, we saw him last week, he didn't even have his tie on. So that was
And he lost it.
that was a big day.
He has one tie. I love Texas. That's the one, right? Sorry, Brian. I'm teasing you here.
So Thomas, one of the things Bob Pulver, I don't know if you know Bob, another genius, I think, in the AI space, wrote, and he just said, curious to hear Thomas's thoughts on synthetic data, its benefits and limitation risks. And, in order to answer that question, I don't know if you want to take a time to explain synthetic data.
Sure.
So I think there's people that don't, and Bob once again, kudos to you for the question, but I believe there's people that don't understand what synthetic data even is.
Yeah. So synthetic data is when you ask AI or something else to create data for you, right? So let's say, for instance, I'm testing a payroll, right? I don't really want to test payroll with, Jason's salary would break most payroll engines, so we can't use his. But we don't really want to be putting, at least if you care about people's data and you want to comply with regulations, the regulations that still exist, you would want to use some sort of alternative to real data. So this is a traditional usage for synthetic data, is you would create some kind of data that resembled the real data but wasn't real data, and you'd want it to get as close as possibly could to real data. And that's much safer than just trying to change the names, right? Because if you just change the names, then you can still sort by salary, and you'll know that Jason's is the biggest number. So then you'll be able to know which one is his, right? So you want to be able to create synthetic data that allows you to protect the value to test products more effectively and to train them, but without compromising the integrity and privacy and the security of real data, right? Because you don't really want real payroll records floating around in a whole bunch of other people's LLM databases, right? The challenge with synthetic data is that at some point it's no longer accurate, right? So it's only a model reflection of reality. It's not exactly reality. And the problem starts to happen is when you have, it's a little bit like putting too much salt in the soup, right? Once you start to mix real data and synthetic data, if you overdo it and you don't understand the provenance of the data, right? So you don't know which data is real data and which data is synthetic data, then you end up having a whole lot of synthetic data that is compromising your genuine data. So there's a balancing act as how you manage that. And there's quite a lot of techniques emerging that help you balance out, how much synthetic data you need compared to how much, genuine data you need to test and build models. Because, getting genuine data, one of the problems we have at the moment with AI is that it's essentially off some of the large language models is they've sucked in the whole internet, right? So now what do we train ourselves on, right? And so the thing now is you train them on synthetic data, but synthetic data itself is not reality. So it starts to get really messy. So synthetic data is great for testing. It's really good for things like payroll simulation and so on. But if you're not careful, and you do it wrong, the synthetic data can, sorry, I'm going on a bit here, can amplify the biases that you have in other data. So, if your test data your test set is like 200 white dudes, and then you make the synthetic set, 4,000 white dudes, then it's not going to help you, manage our, get a real human reading from that data. Let me stop there.
No, Thomas, I think that's great, and I thank you for that. And I totally agree with you. And just so you know, Thomas, I'd love your thoughts on this. Michelle, I'm trying to. There's some great questions I'm trying to incorporate in here. Jess, sorry, I know you probably have one on the tip of your tongue here that you want to go to, but Michelle just said, with all the changes in the world and wanting to keep up, I think prioritizing is important, which it always has been, but today I'd say more than ever. It also sounds like we have to be more agile and deliver minimum lovable product and build from there. And Thomas, just so you know, what I responded in the chat while you were speaking was, I think it depends on who your audience is. If it's IT, it doesn't have to be minimum lovable necessarily. They can figure out how to use it. If it's someone who doesn't know how to spell AI and is scared or is worried that they're reading something from the government, Ellie, about how the data is being used, and therefore they're not going to. We work with organizations all day who still market this stuff as AI, which I think is a mistake, because all you have to do is go online and look up AI, and most things you're going to see are doom stories.
Yeah.
with the exception of curing a disease in 2 days compared to something that's been out there for a couple years.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think that it's really important that we understand our audience and we don't do a peanut butter spread
Yeah.
of this and say, who are we applying the tool for? And
Yeah.
what a person that uses the hammer once a year for is different than a carpenter
Yeah.
who uses the hammer every day. It's a different kind of tool. I'd love your
Completely.
thoughts.
Yeah. So, I'd say, the mistake that we make in the software industry all the time is we talk about. I want to give you another. You can tell I'm good at long-winded metaphors. I'm going to give you another one. So let's imagine for a moment you walk into a really fancy restaurant, right? As you do, Jason, on your travels, and
Can you
you
please?
go into
Whoa,
this.
whoa, 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 whoa. Can you use jets as the analogy
He has
as
no
No,
your
I'm using
example?
you, dude, because I've seen you in these places. You're the there's this thing, you buy the second cheapest Chardonnay on the thing, you that buy the second the most expensive Chardonnay on the wine list. I've seen you
Well,
in it.
but just move on, dude.
So you go into a fancy restaurant like that, right? And you sit down and you're taken to your table, and they give you the menu, and there's like three starters and two main courses and like two desserts, right? Right. And just as you're sitting down, something happens. What happens, Jason? What do they bring you when you're just sitting down? They bring you an amuse-bouche, a little tasting thing, and it's like 6,000 peas squashed into one square inch, and you taste this thing and it explodes in your mouth, and it's completely awesome, right? Right. And then they explain what the menu is, and then this amazing food comes on time, and it's beautiful and it's amazing. And then right at the end of the meal, the chef comes out and talks to you, right, and says, "Oh, I hear you enjoyed the meal. Thanks very much, and here's a signed copy of my cookbook, and so what happens is now let's take the example of a software cycle, right? Software vendor comes in, right, and says, okay, well, what we do is we found the best cow in Switzerland, right, and it's been fed on the best grass ever, and it's gone around and it's been herded by Heidi. And then what we do is we take it to a barn and we shoot it humanely in the head, and then we hang it for 3 weeks, right? And then once it's been hanging from 3 weeks, we take this really sharp knife and we chop it up into these really perfect pieces, and then we fry it in this special tungsten frying pan at 3,000 degrees, and then we bring it out to you on this very special plate that's come from being made in Dresden in China, and then we serve it to you. And then the customer says, "But I'm a vegetarian." Right? So what happens is most software people, they talk about the recipe, right, not about the menu, right? And you have to earn the right to talk about the recipe once people have sampled your menu, right? And so being able to succinctly explain to the person in front of you what it is you're going to be eating. So if you think about that fancy restaurant, right, there are only 5 tables in it, right? So they've qualified who's coming to the restaurant long before, right? To get into that restaurant, you have to book in advance, and you know what it costs and all the rest of it. So then, when you come into the restaurant and there's no numbers on the menu, that's not a problem because you're pre-qualified. Whereas if you go to one of those restaurants that is like, this is an Italian, Chinese, Japanese fusion, mixed with takeaway, mixed with whatever, and you go it in the menus like 400 pages, right? Then you need a lot of explaining and you need a lot of detail, right? And software companies need to get much better at working out who they're talking to, and then tailoring the message, and people that are implementing software too, and then tailoring the message to be the menu. And there are some people who really want to hear the recipe, but the number of people who want to hear the recipe is so much fewer than the people who need to hear the menu.
Yeah.
Right. And we'd be much better off we talk about the menu, and we talk about the tastes and the desires and the whatever that we're going to get from the food, rather than talking and being proud all the time about how smart the technology is.
Or even better yet, the customers who sought your restaurant for one particular item because only you make it that way. And they know that, and you know that. And it doesn't matter how much
Correct.
you charge for that, because that's the
Correct.
thing. That's
That's the thing
exactly
you do.
what
That's
the
the thing you do really well. So trying to take that back to AI. The problem at the moment is we use the word AI too much, right? And we need to talk about what we're solving. What we are solving is the business problem, and how are we, how are we improving the recruitment process, or how are we improving the payroll process? How are we actually making that better?
Yeah.
And then when people ask, "Gee, how do you do that?" And then you ask them, "Are you sure you want to know?" And if they say, "Yeah, I really do," then you hit them with, "Yeah, well, we use a Markov chain, and then we use this, and then we use that, and we do all this clever stuff." But I think we try and blind people with the science before we really focused on what is the problem we're trying to resolve.
Yeah, I agree with
So
Ellen and Sarah in the chat. It's like the use of AI, and every software vendor is out there doing it. Everything is AI powered, AI enabled, AI this and that. It's like showing me a house to buy and saying, and this one is an electric house. It comes with electricity and switches you can turn on to get, I assume it's powered by electricity. We don't need to have
Yeah.
that conversation. That's
Yeah.
the AI conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, Jason, I'll let you go. I do agree.
Yeah.
There were chats earlier about data integrity and the whole trust conversation. Eventually, you have to show how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I think maybe
Yeah.
it's a data certification of trust in data, or something that we need to just.
Trust is such an important word in this. There's a lecturer at Oxford called Rachel Botsman. She's absolutely brilliant. I
love
don't know
her.
whether you've heard of her, but
Yep.
she's like the queen of trust, right?
Yep.
And she talks about these things like the trust stack and the trust gap, right? Right. And she's applied it to AI really, really cleverly. And she talks about how you have to build trust in technology, build trust in on these various levels of the trust stack. But what's very interesting about AI, which makes it different, is that in previous forms of technology, we essentially had the technology do something. We told the technology what to do. It did it, and then we were okay with it afterwards, right? So we weren't delegating a whole lot to the technology. Whereas with AI, what's happening more and more is that we are delegating decision making to the AI, and so we require to build a new form of trust, a new trust framework in terms of how we perceive decisions that are made by AI. And I don't think organizations spend enough time in understanding, thinking about that trust. The other thing that I'd say is that the problem with most AI deployments isn't actually the employees. It's the middle management, right? Same as every single software project the hostility for most technology change does not come from the employees themselves. They see how it makes their work better. If it's going to make the employee's job better, I always go back to employee self-service, right? When I could view my payslip online, I didn't have to train employees how to view the payslip online. If they couldn't do it, they'd ask their mate, "Hey, how do I get to see my payslip 3 days earlier than I used to get it in the post?" Easy peasy. It was the middle manager who has to do the leave approval that was always the problem, right? Even though it was one big button on the screen, approve leave, getting middle managers to actually, do that was the problem. And it's the same, I think, with AI, is that we have the middle management hostility, or the middle management fears, and we think about it as employee fears, but actually it's mainly middle management where we see the problems with, where we see the challenges with AI fears. So let me pause there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the chats, Thomas, I know you probably can't keep up, but Brian Summers talking about gluten-free vodka and potato vodka, and whether vodka has potatoes in it, and bourbon and all this stuff. So how the group got onto that.
As Leia is saying, it's like going to the liquor store and saying this is gluten-free vodka. We would expect so, but then others digress.
Right, right. So, but I did want to talk about one thing that I think is super important about AI, that I think is going to fundamentally change how we think about HR systems. So
Mm.
there's a lot of what we talked earlier, like what I call Potemkin AI, the Potemkin village, where it's like just this front that's doing AI. You sprinkle a little bit of ChatGPT and you think you've got AI. There's a lot of that around at the moment. I don't want to talk about that, but I want to talk about the really disruptive stuff, right?
Mm.
And we've spent the last 70 years using computers to humanity is fundamental, our data in our lives is fundamentally unstructured. And we've used computers to structure that data. And basically we've structured the data because the computer needs it to be structured. If you go back to the early days of HR tech, we'd store man as one and woman as two, right? And we did that, well, because we were misogynist bastards when we programmed it, but we also did it because it made sense from a sorting and a storage point of view to store as numbers rather than as alphanumeric characters, right? You could sort better and you could find and store quicker. It was simpler and cheaper. So there we compromised understandability for performance, right? And basically the history of computing is that compromise, right?
Mm.
But what we're at the cusp of, and what we're starting to do now, is that the computer is becoming very comfortable with unstructured data. So the reason why we have all those lookup tables and why we have all those formulaic rules and structures and whatever, that starts to become less relevant. So what my theory is that the core HR system of the future will be fundamentally different from the core HR system of today, because the core HR system of the last 70 years has been trying frantically to take unstructured, messy humanity and turn it into structured data so that it can store it and we can interrogate it. So we convert man and woman into 1 and 2. We convert the performance appraisal into a 5-point, 4 or 5-point scales, because that's all the computer used to be able to cope with. But now the computer can cope with all of our unstructured data, or not quite now, but almost can cope with our unstructured data. So if I think about if I was building a core HR system today, and we funding people that do this, we're not building it with we want to store a whole lot of structured data. No, right? You just think about payroll for a second. If the AI can read the law, right, and read the law, understand the law, and calculate the payroll, why the hell do I need thousands of lookup tables to do that? Assuming you can do it accurately, and it's a big assumption. But the opportunity to fundamentally rethink the basics of enterprise software is so tantalizing at the moment.
Mm.
And that's where I'm sitting right now, and that's where I'm so excited about this. So I'm both disappointed in AI, and I am so excited about it. Yeah.
So Thomas, we could go on for a long time. Yeah. So when you start to think about that, and you start to think about AI agents, and I need to put because I know you've been doing some work in this space. I just was listening to YouTube with Satya Nadella talk about quantum and the role of agents, and Microsoft's announcement this week. Like what I don't want, and I don't think you're saying, but I want to make sure we say it, is, are you saying that everyone that's put in SAP, Oracle, and SuccessFactors up until this point is going to end up ripping it out in the next year or 2 years? Or are you saying instead of putting it on, instead of finding a blank piece of land, we're going to build up, we're going to build around, and we're going to optimize the data that's in Oracle, SAP, and Workday that we already have today?
Well,
or is it both?
I have no idea what's going to happen, and people who say they're going to know is going to happen are probably wrong. But let me explain what I think is going to happen, and that will happen over time, right? We will find that there will be we're in a phase at the moment of like AI augmentation, right? So basically we have the existing stack and then we augment it with AI, right? And that will work for a while, right? It's safe, it's simple, it's relatively easy to do, it doesn't disrupt things. And then we'll come to a point there where those traditional systems are a constraint to AI. because those systems are designed for, those systems generally have been poorly designed for humans to put data into them, but they've been designed
Yes.
with the idea of a human being typing data into them. They haven't been optimized for AI doing the data input. So actually what we're doing at the moment is we're asking the AI to behave like a human to put data into these systems and take data out of these systems, which is an inefficient and awkward exercise. But
And that's beautifully said, by the way.
but we will have to do that for a while. But I think there will be a point at which there will be new ways of doing this, and there'll be a mixture of some of the existing vendors will rethink their architectures and models, and some of them won't, right? And there'll be new players that emerge that do things very differently and will disrupt the core. So I believe that over the next few years, AI will be more disruptive than the move from on-premise to cloud was, right? Because the move to on-premise and cloud, if you look around, right, like it's the same dudes, right? You know, it's like it's like SAP, right? Okay, they bought SuccessFactors, but it's SAP. It's Ceridian, which has been around since reverse takeover and all the rest of it, but it's still been around since day dot. It's ADP, which started in 1947, if my memory is correct, right? It's Workday, which is now 20 years old, and it is and Workday was, if we're honest with ourselves, was the son or daughter of PeopleSoft. And Oracle's been in this business for ages. And so if we look around, it's at least in the enterprise, it's respect to those vendors, because they've managed to move from sort of one technology generation to the next, with relatively limited disruption. I mean, it feels like very disruptive to customers, but the vendor landscape has not fundamentally changed in the enterprise space. And the question I have going forward is, and as an investor in new startups, I'm obviously biased because I want to invest in those companies that will eventually drive the irrelevance of the existing incumbents. But we've got a long way to go. But the opportunity to fundamentally rethink enterprise software is coming. And the question I have in my mind is do the incumbents rethink it again successfully? Or do new players come in and upheave the landscape with something fundamentally different?
Yeah, really quickly, Kyle, I see your note in here. I put a link into an event that Thomas is doing on the 6th of March, which
I was
is
going to mention that. Thank you.
and I just put a link in there because Kyle, you said, isn't this just the same dudes again? And it's not the same dudes again. The panel that Thomas is doing on the 6th of March that I hope you guys can attend based on that link I just put in is a different, it's not all dudes, but it's a different set of dudes that are thinking about this differently. And maybe you want to talk to that real quick, Thomas.
Yeah, sure. So, we fund early stage startups and most of them are doing intensive AI work. So if you look at the big software vendors, they've got thousands of engineers and they've got a small number of AI people working on it. If you look at a startup today, they're like, a small number of engineers and a lot of AI people, right? And so the AI intensity in startups is much more significant than it is in enterprise in the traditional incumbent vendor landscape. And so what I've done is I've got 5 portfolio companies of ours to come and talk about, and it'll be a little bit geeky, but I think it'll be super interesting for those of you that are interested in AI, like about deploying AI in production and what they're doing, to make it work. So it's quite a bit more it's a recipe session rather than a menu session. And so the 5 companies that I've got speaking are Arist, which is an e-learning, a learning management play, super fascinating next generation learning play. There is PeopleRain, who I think have one of the best agentic plays for HR and for IT service. So I've got it right here. I've got the chief scientist from TechWolf, and Claire McTarget from SquarePeg, which is an AI-centric recruitment play, and then Jerome Governal from Datascaler. So Jerome's been around for a while. He was actually one of the, he was quite senior at ADP. and he's broken away and doing something very special in payroll integrations. So if you're interested in payroll integrations, then you should definitely talk to Jerome. But these are all people that are doing something different with AI. And as much as I love the incumbents, I worked, I made my living in the incumbent land for a long time. What I'd urge you to do is don't set your, this is to the corporates in the world, don't set your AI strategy just by what the big vendors tell you. Get out there, meet the startups, learn from the next generation of people, because the stuff that I'm seeing that people are building in weeks and months compared to what was taking years before, it's just completely amazing. And I try and like build in a bit of reality and rationality in terms of deploying these systems and all the rest of it. They're still challenging to deploy or whatever, but the innovation that's going on at the moment in these early companies and the energy of these startups is just super fascinating to behold. And I'd urge you to spend just a portion of your time as find the local startups in your town. This is my appeal to you HR people on the call. Go and mentor an HR startup in your town. Go find one, right, and help them, right, and you will learn so much you will be the smartest person in the room about AI if you sit down with a startup that's in your space. You don't tell them what to do. Think of yourself as, I like to think of myself as a caddy rather than as a player. But you will get so much benefit out of it. When you see these people like coming out of college and they've got this idea, and you say, oh, well, have you thought about this? Or I can introduce you here, I can introduce you there. And heck, if you can afford it, stick an angel check in. Stick an angel check in yourself. It might turn into something quite remarkable. But the best way to learn about the new world is to participate. And I'd say, as an HR leader or as a thing, get out there. And if you want advice on how to do that, do ping me, because I'm helping quite a lot of HR people take that journey. But I would love to see you encouraging people to build the things that you think your organization needs. And that's like gold for those people. But their thing is they've got the technical knowledge, but they don't know the business problem. They don't want you to tell them the solution, or you shouldn't tell them, but they should tell you what's your problem.
Yep.
And then
I love that.
Then magic happens. Because you get people that they get captivated by your problem, and they think of ways of solving it that you could not imagine. And it's just so beautiful to behold. So go out there, find those startups, and nurture them and help them on the path.
What great advice. I do think there's a lot of proximity bias that happens when you start with known solutions, known problems as you've understood them for decades. Some of my favorite startup and emerging tech has come completely out of left field. And the HR use case is almost like the secondary use case, where they have this thing that does this really cool, and they go, wait a minute, does this help you over here with that HR problem, or does this actually do something for employee engagement? Like turn guns on a second set of problems. I love that.
Yeah, and the scope of, I don't know how much longer you guys have got, but I can keep talking forever.
We're already over. I love this. Jason,
the scope of HR tech is going to grow and grow and grow, right? And so, if you think back again, going back to 1951, the scope was like payroll, right? And then it grew and grew, and we added recruitment, right? We added learning, we added this, we added that, we added employee engagement stuff and surveys and listening and whatever else. And, over time, the scope of what is HR tech is just going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And there's so much opportunity in this, in this space to do things. On the one hand, it's like, how do we revolutionize the existing stuff? So how do we build a better payroll, which I think is a fascinating topic. Weirdly, and I love payroll. I'll talk about payroll all day. So, but there's also like, if you think about the wellness stuff that's come in the last few years, there'll be new categories emerging of HR software all the time that we've not yet thought of. So I think it's a super place to be. and it's always cool to be on your show.
Oh,
Thomas,
thank
what time
you.
is it there?
What's that?
It's 10 past 8 where I am.
Yeah, it's dinner time, right?
It is something like that. Yeah.
You gonna go to that fancy restaurant with the peas, the amuse-bouche?
Not tonight. Not tonight. No, not tonight. Not tonight. I've got one of my kids coming home from university a bit later, so I'm gonna
Oh,
hang out with hang out with one of my. I've got the same thing as you guys. They're all. But we're empty nesters now, Charlotte and I. So I'm trying to figure out what to do with ourselves. Yeah.
yeah.
She's
Well,
written
Tom,
a book. She's written a book, and
Oh.
I'm buying bicycles. So yeah.
I was gonna link that. I was gonna link her book, and I completely forgot. Um,
Yeah. You
I'm
should
gonna
have her
do
on the
it.
show. Actually, then
We actually should.
yeah.
Yes.
She's just published a book on leadership.
Oh, we'd love to have.
It's coming out
Yeah.
in June. So
We definitely need to.
yeah.
Brian Summer, if you can see, he just did his best job of writing Auf Wiedersehen there in the chat. So,
Did he say Auf
uh,
Wiedersehen, you all?
Auf Wiedersehen, Thomas.
Cool.
So, thank you guys. Thank you, Thomas, so much for being here. Appreciate it. Love you. And Jess, good to see you. I'm off to Saudi Arabia. Thomas,